Hi, welcome to Accelerated Engineering. This is part 2 of my Beginner's Guide to Excel. This is on specifically formatting cells. If you're looking for something else on a tutorial on a particular function or on a different bit of Excel, please let me know in the comments so that I can get started making that. So every cell can be formatted in about a gajillion different ways. And because there are so many ways to make things look different, I'm going to work through them one by one, slowly and methodically, and there should be chapters in this video in the way that I've broken this up. Because most of the tools for formatting cells are under the Home tab and on the ribbon here, I'm going to be working through it from left to right, and the chapters should show that: clipboard, font, alignment, number, styles, cells, editing, and analysis. And depending on, probably won't look at sensitivity, it doesn't seem relevant. There are a couple of items on other tabs that we will also be reviewing. So without further ado, let's get started. The first part of formatting cells is related to the contents. And I mean, you can type contents in a variety of different ways, however you like, and that is editing the format of the cell. Now, the cut and copy are probably familiar tools for anybody who's used a word processor or any of the rest of the Microsoft suite. And a cut just grabs the data that you've got and allows you to paste it somewhere else. You can paste it over there. Copy does the same thing as a cut, allowing you to place data somewhere else, but it allows you to keep the data in the original source cell. That's how cut and copy is different. And in case you're wondering, the same keyboard shortcuts that work in Microsoft Excel will work here. Control X is cut, Control C is copy, and Control V is paste. Now, Excel also has this nifty tool called the Format Painter, and it has a nice tooltip that describes exactly what it does. What it allows us to do is grab something where we like the format, click the Format Painter, and then put it somewhere else. And we can do that, let's do that again. It will allow us to click and drag to all these cells, and it will apply the same format. I'm just going to Control Z to reverse that. That's basically how the format paint. The clipboard drop-down button will open up the clipboard and show any values that you have previously cut or copied and allow you to paste them into places that you've selected. So for example, I can paste my previous values all over the place, like so. And I'll just delete those because I don't need them anymore. That's kind of the clipboard chunk. Next, let's look at font. And I've already used some of these on this little table here. Mostly I've used the border tool. What the border tool allows is for taking, well, I should just clear this by selecting no border. What the border tools allow is for additional lines or grid lines to be applied to tabled data. This is the manual way of doing it. There's a quicker way I'll show you in a little bit, but this allows the most control. I can add grid lines, I can add a thick outside border around data that I want to have a thicker border, like so. It also allows for the adding of just around the outside of a select area and thin border. You can throw bottom double border, which is often used in the case of a subtotal. Let's just apply that so you can see what it looks like. You can see it's got a thick double border between these rows of cells. Reverse that. Yeah, that's the gist of it. There are some other tools that are less commonly used down near the bottom. Most of the work will be done with these borders here. Of course, the bold, italics, and underline tools are related to your text values. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. Related to the text values, where you can make things italics, you can make things bold, you can make things underlined, or any combination of those formats. That's the quick way to do that. Sometimes we want things to be bigger, and there's a couple ways to do this. The size of the text can be selected from this drop-down menu through any number of sizes. You can make it very big or very small. We can also use these increase and decrease font size buttons to nudge the font up or down in size as we like. And of course, there is the ability to completely change the font through any of a wide number of available fonts. And exactly what fonts you have will depend on your installation on Windows, and in general I suggest that you stick with the basic fonts, Calibri, Times New Roman, something basic, unless you have more of an artistic bent than I do and want to play with it. What else can we do here in the font tab? Well, we can add background fill. Similar to what I've done here in my table header and this other informational column, we can add all sorts of colors any way we want. And Excel has all the colors. Any color that you can imagine you can select in here. And if the one isn't in your theme colors or standard colors, you can go ahead and pick from an entire color palette using an RGB code. Oh, look at that. You can even select between color models. If you don't like RGB, you can use HSL. I'm always an RGB person. There are some other standard colors on this hex grid, but that's, yeah, anyway, lots of colors. For the sake of this, I'm going to temporarily color these with no fill, because I want to save that for later. And I think I will clear the text formatting as well. I don't need it anymore. Speaking of text formatting, we can also change the color of the text itself. For example, bright red. But usually I stick with automatic unless there's a reason to do otherwise. Now, moving into the alignment tab, some of these will look familiar from Microsoft Word. For example, all of the actual text alignments can be done to the left, to the right, or centered, which is what I usually prefer to use. There's also a vertical alignment where your text can be aligned towards the top, the middle, or the bottom. And now that didn't change. So let's do something here. We're going to make all of these a little bit wider, quite a bit wider. Deeper, I guess. And then mess with the vertical alignment. So we're at the bottom aligned right now. We can also do middle aligned or top aligned. And I'm just going to make sure everything is centered. There we go. We're going to go centered and centered now that everything is super big. Centered and centered. I like that. Now this is way too big to be reasonable, so I'm going to just resize all of these. And Excel is nice. It will take all of the rows that I've got highlighted and resize them simultaneously. There is another way to do that. We'll look at that shortly. What else can I do? Well, I can take the alignment or the angle of my text and turn it. So for example, if I was doing a chart like this, I can take the text and turn it to the side. And this is really useful for cases like this, where I have a long or a large amount of text and then a relatively short value. It just makes the table kind of nicer to read. Now in this case it did some gimpy things with the color. I don't really like it, so I'm going to Control-C and just undo that. There's also the allowance for text indents, either to decrease or increase the indent of your text. This is more important when you have multi-line text, and I think it automatically defaults to having it be left aligned when we do that. Now, speaking of multi-line text, what happens when you have really long strings of text? Microsoft Excel has the default of just having your text spill over into the next cell. And if I left align it, it spills all the way over to the right, takes up a whole bunch of space. By using the wrap text option, we can tell it to keep the text within the bounds of that column and instead make the row longer. Resizing this column by clicking and dragging will change the arrangement of the text, and I can change this cell or this row in order to fit better. That's one way to manipulate that, depending on your preference for how you want your text to display. Now that we've got a really long bit of text and some odd row depths, let's look at another way of resizing these cells. If I go to the junction of a column and double click, Excel will automatically expand that column to fit the widest value in that column. If I do the same thing over in my data table, you can see it's expanded this to fit Lincoln Continental. If I do it here, it will expand to fit Highlander. Doing the same thing with the rows, it will adjust the height of the row to fit the tallest value in that row. In this case, everything is single line, so when I double click, it will bring it back to the default row width, or row height, pardon me. If I take my text wrap and turn it on, and then narrow this column, you can see that it has lost some of the text, it's just disappeared. Double clicking the row height will expand to show all of the text. That's kind of a handy way of keeping things visible. The merge and center function is a great way of taking a big block and then making it into one thing. For example, if I wanted to add a title to this table and call it Cost of Cars by Year, well, most of the time I don't want a table to have a value all the way off to one side. I will take all of the cells across the columns that kind of outline my table and hit merge and center. It takes all of those cells and makes them effectively one cell, and then automatically centers the text within that cell. Now, there are some other options for merging across, and of course the best thing to know that you can do is unmerge. If I decided I didn't like that, I can always undo this. It maintains the center line, so I'll tweak that back. For now, let's just take that merge and center, and then I'm going to give it a slightly different color in order to make it pop a little bit. Delete that and clear. That covers everything under the alignment tab. Although I should point out that each of these tabs also has a pop-out option, which brings open a format cell toolbox, which has a few more options or some more detailed options. It has things like number formats, alignment, font, which you've seen most of it before, more options for border, more options for filling with color, and then options for protecting the cells when you lock the worksheet. And this is beyond the scope of this particular guide. So continuing on to the numbers. Fortunately, I have a lot of numbers. Most of the time, Excel defaults to having a general format or a general number format in all of its cells. That is the default condition. However, we can change that to all sorts of different options. For example, I have a table right now that would probably make the most sense to have everything formatted as a currency. So since it's all dollar values, I can change this to currency. Oh, this is a good thing. See how it's replaced values with number signs? My number is still there. Excel just doesn't have enough space to display it. By expanding the columns, there ends up being enough space now, and it will display the numbers properly again. Another important thing to note is that this hasn't changed the values in the cell. If I click on any of these cells, it's still the original number. It's just displayed a little bit differently with the extra decimal places and a dollar sign out the front and a comma separating the hundreds from the thousands. What else can we do here that's interesting? Well, there's date options, time options, options for showing percentages. A really common error that I see in a lot of spreadsheets is when a date has been entered, Excel recognizes that as a date, but sometimes it will be changed to a number, which shows a weird format. And this is how Excel thinks about dates. It's not how humans think about dates. If you ever expect a date and get a weird number like that, probably just needs to reformat the cell to a date. With all of these, there are modifications that can be thrown in. For example, we can toggle. Oh, can we? Nope, we can't. If I change this back to general, we'll change it back to general, and then start toggling options like the comma, and it will automatically say, okay, you do want a comma, which it won't let me undo because now it thinks that it's in accounting mode. We can change this to a percentage where it says, well, the number 8,585 is 858,500%. We can also throw dollars in, or some denomination signs for dollars. Looks like pounds, euros, and yen, just for the fun of it. All sorts of things that are options there, and the symbol is automatically inserted. Now again, this doesn't change the value in the cell, it only changes the manner in which it is displayed. I'm going to take these all and change them back to currency because I think I like that the best for right now. And that covers most of our number options. Oh, no, wait, let's change the decimal places. For this one, I don't think I need to show all of the 0 senses, so let's just drop that down to not show 0 senses. Of course, you can always put as many zeros as you want, but, you know, even dollars. All right. Let's take a look at conditional formatting, still within these numbers. Conditional formatting allows a change in the way that the cell is displayed based on the values inside of the cell. So for example, we could highlight cells that are, we'll pick the first one, greater than, Excel suggests this number, 5,457. I'm going to take it as just 5,000. 5,000, there we go. And there are a number of different formats that we could select. We can select green, yellow, red, are kind of the default ones. You can also default to red text, useful if you're an accountant trying to highlight negative numbers. Red border can be thrown on here. We've also got the ability, of course, to customize a format and select any font, border, fill, or even number format option, depending on the value that's present. I'm going to put it back to green for now and say that that's the way that that's going to be. Now, this is a dynamic conditional format, which means that I can take any cell here, and if I change the value to meet that condition or to not meet that condition, the formatting will update. These conditional formats also layer. So for example, these are all conditioned with a greater than option, but I can also format them with a less than. And if I say I want to highlight all the values that are less than $1,000 in red, I can do that. Oops. And it will highlight any value less than $1,000 in red. What else can we do with conditional formatting? First, I'm just going to clear these rules. Clear the rules from the selected cells, because I'm done with that particular set. We can throw data bars in, and what this does is it fills each cell proportionately relative to the values in all the rest of the cells. So let's see. where's my largest value? It looks like this one right here. That's probably going to be the cell that's all the way full. And the rest of them all show values that are less full, proportionate to this value. If I change this value, let's see, let's change it up instead. If I make this a really big number, all the rest of the bars get really, really small, and only one of them is full. If I change this to kind of back in the range of the rest of them, then it shows proportional to everything else. Just to clear that. There we go. Another neat one that I like is the color scales, which shows kind of a color map, or like almost like a thermal map, of all the values ranging from, in this case, blue is a high number and red is a low number. But we could change that to be the other way around, where red is a high number and blue is a low number. So there's a neat way of visualizing some data. In fact, I have some data on a different tab that would benefit from that. By taking these sales numbers and scaling them, we can see that our sales in this particular example have been climbing consistently all through the year without actually having to look at each of the numbers by itself. Let's clear that. While we're here, does that finish up our conditional formatting? There are icon sets that can be used. For example, don't need that. Should finish this up. Clear. We can also use icon sets, and they will show values relative to each other. And these can be tweaked. So for example, let's do this. It doesn't really mean anything in this context, the check marks or the exclamation marks. But it looks like checks are high, exclamation marks are medium, and these are low. We can go into these and manage our rules and take a look at this one, and then go in and edit the options. And for example, this rule, and all of the rules are going to have different sets of options that you can twiddle. This one says you can select your icon to a custom value. You can change the value to be different. For example, let's just change this to 50%, and we're going to have it be an X when it's less than 25%, say. Okay, hit OK. And we should see now when I hit apply that some of these are going to update. Apply, and a bunch of them changed in order to meet the new conditions of the rules. All of your rules will show up here one after the other. The icon one is, yeah, just kind of neat. Okay, and that concludes all of the rules. Yeah, I think that concludes all the rules. There is this option for new rule, and if you really want to get fancy, you can use a formula to determine which cells to format, which lets you kind of set your own rules and determine how things are formatted, beyond the scope of this particular tutorial. Let's look at the format as a table. Format as a table is a really quick and easy way of taking blank data and changing it into something according to one of Excel's internal templates. For example, I can take this data, it says, where is your data? It's in this range. Yes, my table has headers, month and sales are headers. I hit OK, and it automatically formats it as a table. You can see it's got some nice lines. It's formatted my header in a pleasant way, and now when I change it, it will just change the whole table. But let's see, I like it when it has the alternating colored rows. I think that looks very nice. Very fancy. That's a quick way of formatting as a table. Let's jump back to this one. Clear the rules here. The other part of styles is these rapid fix cells. It allows you to take things, and Excel suggests a number of types of formatting in order to indicate certain cell qualities, if that makes sense. For example, I have a value over here that's a response to a formula. I might format that as an output. And if you're consistent in using this particular set of styles, then anybody who looks at this and knows the styles knows that this is an output. Similarly, we could take all of these values and change them to an input, say. And anybody who looks at these can see that those are inputs in accordance with this default style. Now, all of these styles, if we right-click on them, can be modified, and there are a certain number of modifications that we can make or apply in order to change up these styles. But this is a quick way of jumping between multiple styles. Multiple styles. I'm just going to change these back. There we go. That's everything in styles. So for cells, we have a few tools. They're insert, delete, and format. Format, actually, we've already seen some of these items. Well, maybe not. We've seen how to do column width. So for example, I can take this and take my column width and say auto fit, or a column width, and I can actually set a value. Let's set a value of 12, and it will space all of my columns evenly. Very handy if you're looking to clean something up for a presentation, as long as you note that it doesn't account for any overflow. You can do the same thing with rows. What else in format? Hiding and unhiding rows is a neat tool. If we say, I don't want to show these columns, I can enter this formatting option and hide these columns so that they're no longer visible. And they're just disappeared. Not gone. And you can see that the address bar F, G, H, skip a few, L, M, N, and carries on. And we can always get them back by unhiding the columns. If you're interested in the faster way of doing that, we can also use the right-click context menu, and down at the bottom there is an option to hide, and similarly to unhide. While we're in format, you can also change your tab color. So when it's talking about tab color, I'll change it to red to show it off, it means the color of your sheet tab. So for example, when I click out of it, this shows up in bright red. I can change this next one, I'll change it to blue, and I'll change this one to green for no other reason than I feel like it. There we go. Now all of our tabs are nicely colored. You can also get there more quickly by right-clicking and going through the context menu to your tab color and change colors in here. In format. Format has an option to move or copy sheets. Most usefully, we can move sheets around to the end or create a copy. And if you have multiple files open, it will allow you to change between which workbooks are open, and you can copy sheets to different workbooks. Inside of a sheet, you can also click and drag to move sheets around in any order that you want. If you want to hide an entire sheet, you can also hide an entire sheet, and it will no longer be discoverable until you unhide it. And of course, you can also access that hide through the visibility portion of the format menu, hiding an entire sheet. Okay, we have the option to delete cells. So you can delete cells, you can delete entire rows, you can delete entire comments, and you can delete entire sheets. Be careful with this. Deleting things can be permanent. It isn't always. Sometimes you can Control Z and get stuff back, but in general, assume that deleting things is permanent. I'm going to risk it now and say, let's delete a sheet row, and the entire row is gone. Control Z. Same thing. I can delete cells, and then it will give me the option to shift left, shift up. I'm going to say shift left in this case, and what it will do is it takes everything in the row and just bumps it over one. It's useful if you want to get rid of just one value. Of course, you can always clear something by just hitting the delete key, but this just works a little bit differently. Inserting can work the same way and shift all of your cells either to the right or down. And you can always insert an entire row or an entire column using those commands. You can also insert a row or a column by right-clicking on your row or on your column and selecting insert, and you can insert that way. It always inserts above, and it always inserts to the left if you are using a column, like so. Okay, I think that will sum up everything in cells. Let's take a look at this next editing tab. One of the things it's got there is an auto sum feature. If I click on an auto sum feature, it does exactly what it says it was going to do. It takes whatever row or column you have selected and just adds out to the right or down and provides a sum of everything in that column. And it even gives you the formula of how it's done that function inside of the cell. It does this by a formula. Clear those. We have the option to fill. Excel will try to fill things in, and it will try to do that intelligently. Let's just switch over to this guy. So for example, if I tell it to fill and go down, oops, there we go, pardon me. If I tell it to fill down, it will look at the cell above it and try to guess at what the next value should be. Now, ideally, I wanted that to say January and continue the year pattern, but Excel didn't figure it out. That's okay. Another way that you can do this sort of predictive filling is, and this one will work, is by selecting a group of data that you want either repeated or extended, and then clicking in the lower right hand corner where you get this quick fill option. Your cursor will turn to a little dark cross, and you can click and drag and see from the tool tip how it's automatically filling that data in, and it repeats as far as you drag it. Now this one, I don't think it will work as well, but it looks like it tries to guess at what the next numbers should be. It doesn't do a great job, but it tried. That's options for the fill. Let's see, and then clear, of course, is the erase tool. If we hit clear all, oops, it will clear everything from your selected range. If we just want to clear the formats, we can do that, although it won't work in the context of a table. Let's just go here and hit clear all to clear some formats, and it just gets rid of all of your borders, it gets rid of all of your colored backgrounds, kind of undoes some of the nice stuff. As opposed to clearing contents, which just gets rid of the values. You can also clear hyperlinks if you have hyperlinks in your document, but we're not worried about that. Comments and notes are another way of inserting data that's outside of the scope of this tutorial. Sorting and filtering is a good trick. Let's grab this table right here. Now that we have some extra values in it, let's say that I want to sort this table from A to Z in order of months. A couple of clicks and it's done. It's sorted all of my data by month and kept the appropriate numbers with that data. Very useful. We can also do a custom sort, which would allow us to sort by a different column. For example, I could sort by the sales column from smallest to largest, and it will do that. And if you have lots of data, a custom sort will allow you to sort by multiple levels. For example, sorting by month and then by sales is not a bad option. A to Z, smallest to largest. Let's sort it the other way, from Z to A, reverse alphabetical, and then from smallest to largest. I have 2 Septembers, the smallest value on top. 2 Octobers, smaller value on top. Lots of ways we can do that. Now for the filter, I don't think it will let us, oops, I saw the buttons disappear. We'll put the filter tab back. What filtering allows us to do in the context of a table, and if you select the filter button, Excel will try to automatically make your data into a table, is we can go in here and select which values we want to see in that table. So I clicked select all to deselect everything, and then let's say I only want to see values from January and May. because reasons. When I click OK, it automatically hides all of the rows that contain values that are not May or January. The data is not gone. I can always get it back by clearing the filter or by changing which values are selected. You can add values, take away values, and it will always take it back. And again, I can always get rid of this by clearing the filter. Finding and selecting is a good tool to have. This isn't a formatting tool, it's just a quick way to get around, so I'm not going to cover it today. Let's see. That covers all the tools that are useful here for formatting. Yeah, for formatting cells. The analyze data is a quick way to use some automated information, and Excel will try to give you graphs that are based on your data. It can be a little bit problematic sometimes, and I think I'll do a more detailed tutorial on that separately. What else did I need? Right. We talked about doing formatting things as a table. Another way of formatting things as a table is by selecting data and then clicking the Insert Table button. Let's see, what else is in here? All of our charts for formatting data. Oh, right. Some things are harder to get to than others. For example, symbols. If you want to insert any wonky symbols, the Symbols tool underneath the Insert tab is the place to go. Page Layout has a nifty formatting tool where there are the you can use your themes or colors, and that doesn't show up quite the way I want it to. Let's just kick everything off to the side. No, let's do this table. Where by changing your theme, you can change all the colors and fonts and some of the highlights and styles of your whole worksheet all at once. You can change just the colors in any of these sort of pre-made selections. And fonts can be adjusted in this way too, if you want to look for a particular style or set. I think that's all for formatting. Let's just touch on grid lines again. Your grid lines and headers can always be shut off. This is nice if you want to build a dashboard or take a screenshot. For example, using the Windows Snip and Sketch tool, we can take a screenshot and not have any of the grid lines except for the ones that we wanted. I think that concludes all of this guide on formatting cells. Thank you for your time watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if this was helpful to you, and leave me a comment if there's something that you thought I missed or would like to know more about. Have a great day.